The board meeting at Pinnacle Luxury Resorts was supposed to be routine quarterly reviews. Instead, scandal erupted when CEO Veronica Fenro's engagement to her billionaire fiancé exploded across every tabloid. Photos of him with another woman. Wedding cancellation, public humiliation that threatened her family's century-old hospitality empire. Her grandfather's will was crystal clear. Control of the company required marriage before her 35th birthday. Now just 48 hours away, desperate. Board members whispered about hostile takeovers. Stock prices plummeted. Everything she'd built hung in the balance. That's when Veronica's eyes landed on Alex Thornwell, the night janitor quietly emptying trash cans in the corner of the boardroom. Without hesitation, she stood up, walked across the marble floor in her designer heels, and delivered the words that would change both their lives forever. "Marry me right now, or you're fired." What happened next shocked everyone in that room and revealed secrets that would transform a billionaire heiress and a single father forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The emergency board meeting at Pinnacle Luxury Resorts was supposed to address quarterly earnings, not damage control for a scandal that threatened to topple a hospitality empire built over 4 generations. The mahogany boardroom on the 47th floor of the Thornfield Tower buzzed with panicked energy as 12 board members huddled around tablets, displaying the morning's devastating headlines. Billionaire playboy caught cheating 3 days before wedding to hotel heiress. Fenro fortune in jeopardy as wedding plans crumble. Will Veronica Fenro lose everything? The photographs were damning. Harrison Blackwood, heir to a shipping fortune and Veronica's fiancé of 2 years, sprawled across a yacht in Monaco with socialite twins, his arm around one while kissing the other. The images had surfaced at 3 a.m. Eastern Time, just as the European markets opened. By dawn, Pinnacle stock had plummeted 15%. Board chairman Harold Brennan, a silver-haired man who'd worked with 4 generations of Fenros, stood at the head of the polished table with the grim expression of someone delivering a death sentence. The room's floor-to-ceiling windows offered a spectacular view of downtown Phoenix, but nobody was admiring the scenery. "Ladies and gentlemen," Brennan began, his voice heavy with decades of corporate wars, "we're facing an extinction-level event. The Fenro Family Trust, established by Victoria's great-grandfather in 1924, contains a matrimonial clause that seemed quaint when it was written, but is now our potential destruction." He activated the wall-mounted display, revealing the relevant section of the trust document, written in formal legal language that had seemed like a harmless relic of a more traditional era. Section 4.2 clearly states that controlling interest in Pinnacle Luxury Resorts passes to the eldest Fenro heir upon marriage, but only if said marriage occurs before their 35th birthday. Should this condition remain unfulfilled, controlling interest reverts to the Fenro Foundation Board, effectively placing the company under external management. The silence in the room was suffocating. Everyone knew what external management meant: a hostile takeover disguised as philanthropy. The Fenro Foundation Board consisted primarily of competitors and corporate raiders who'd been circling Pinnacle for years, waiting for exactly this opportunity. Chief Financial Officer Margaret Sterling cleared her throat nervously. "Harold, what's our timeline here? Veronica turns 35 on Thursday. Today is Tuesday." Brennan's words fell like hammer blows. 48 hours. The implications hit the room like a tsunami. Pinnacle Luxury Resorts wasn't just a company. It was a lifestyle empire spanning 37 countries. 5-star hotels, exclusive resorts, private clubs, and luxury experiences that catered to the world's elite. The Fenro name was synonymous with elegance and exclusivity, built on a century of carefully cultivated reputation. Legal counsel David Martinez, no relation to any prohibited names. Simply a common surname, shuffled through documents with the desperate efficiency of a man trying to find a loophole in ironclad language. I've reviewed every clause, every amendment, every addendum added to this trust over the past century. There are no exceptions, no extensions, no alternative interpretations. Marriage before the 35th birthday, or the company is gone. What about Harrison? Asked Marketing Director Janet Walsh, though her voice lacked any real hope. Can we salvage this somehow? Brennan's laugh was bitter. Harrison Blackwood released a statement an hour ago, officially ending the engagement. His legal team is already working to extract him from any financial obligations. Apparently, the cheating was just the public face of what's been a loveless arrangement for months. He's moved on, and he's taken our salvation with him. The room erupted in controlled panic. Voices overlapped as board members grasped for solutions that didn't exist. Could they find another suitable husband in 48 hours? Could they challenge the trust in court? Could they restructure the company to avoid the matrimonial clause? Even if we could find someone, Sterling pointed out with brutal honesty, the legal requirements for a valid marriage include proper documentation, waiting periods in most states, and blood tests in some jurisdictions. We don't have time for a conventional wedding, even if we had a conventional groom. That's when Harold Brennan noticed the quiet figure in the corner of the boardroom. Alex. Thornwell had entered the room 20 minutes earlier to empty the wastebaskets and replace the water bottles, tasks he performed with the invisible efficiency expected of night maintenance staff. At 42, he possessed the kind of understated presence that allowed him to move through spaces like a ghost, noticed only when something needed fixing or cleaning. He was tall, perhaps 6'2", with the broad shoulders and calloused hands that spoke of physical labor rather than gym memberships. His dark hair was conservatively cut, showing threads of silver at the temples. His maintenance uniform was clean and pressed, worn with a dignity that somehow elevated what should have been menial clothing. As the board members continued their increasingly frantic discussions, Alex continued his work methodically. He'd heard every word. It was impossible not to in the acoustically perfect boardroom, but he maintained the professional invisibility that his position required. He'd learned long ago that powerful people spoke more freely when they forgot the help was listening. Brennan's eyes fixed on Alex with the sudden intensity of a drowning man spotting driftwood. An idea was forming, desperate and probably insane, but the only option remaining in a situation where all conventional options had been exhausted. "You there," Brennan called out, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Maintenance." The room fell silent. Alex straightened from where he'd been replacing the water cooler bottle, turning to face the board with the same calm attention he gave all aspects of his work. "Yes, sir?" Alex's voice was steady, neither servile nor defensive. There was something in his tone that suggested this wasn't a man easily rattled, even when summoned by a room full of executives in crisis mode. Brennan studied Alex for a long moment, his mind racing through possibilities that would have seemed absurd in any other circumstance. "What's your name?" "Alex Thornwell, sir. Night maintenance supervisor." "Are you married, Mr. Thornwell?" The question caught everyone off guard. Several board members exchanged confused glances, wondering if the stress had finally caused their chairman to snap. Alex's expression remained neutral, though something flickered in his dark eyes. "No, sir. I'm not married." "Any significant relationships, engagements?" "Romantic complications that would prevent you from marrying immediately." Now the board members understood what Brennan was considering, and the collective intake of breath was audible. It was so outrageous, so unprecedented, so completely desperate that it might actually work. Alex's eyebrows rose slightly, the first crack in his professional composure. "I'm sorry, sir, but I'm not sure I understand the relevance of my personal life to maintenance duties." Before Brennan could respond, the boardroom doors burst open with the controlled violence of someone accustomed to making dramatic entrances. Veronica Fenro strode into the room like a force of nature barely contained in a designer suit. At 34, she possessed the kind of commanding presence that made boardrooms feel smaller and subordinates feel smaller still. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a severe chignon that emphasized her sharp cheekbones and piercing green eyes. Her charcoal Armani suit was impeccably tailored. Her heels clicked against the marble floor with the precision of a countdown timer. She'd clearly been awake all night, dealing with lawyers, publicists, and damage control specialists, but she showed no signs of exhaustion. If anything, she radiated the dangerous energy of someone who'd been backed into a corner and was ready to fight her way out. "I assume you've all seen the headlines," she said without preamble, her voice carrying the crisp authority of someone born to command. "I assume you've all reviewed the trust documents. I assume you all understand exactly how catastrophic this situation has become. She moved to the head of the table, claiming her position as CEO despite the informal nature of her entrance. Her eyes swept the room, cataloging expressions, measuring loyalty, calculating who would stand with her and who would abandon ship at the first opportunity. "So," she continued, her tone deceptively calm, "what solutions are we proposing?" The boardroom remained silent. What could they say? That they'd been discussing the impossible task of finding her a husband in 48 hours? That they'd been calculating the company's dissolution value? That they'd been preparing for the end of everything her family had built? That's when Veronica's gaze fell on Alex Thornwell, still standing quietly in the corner with a half-empty trash bag in his hands, inadvertently witness to the most important crisis in Pinnacle's history. Their eyes met across the room, and for just a moment, time seemed suspended. She saw something in his steady gaze, not the fear or excitement she'd expected from an employee suddenly thrust into corporate drama, but something else entirely. Assessment, understanding, and perhaps, impossibly, a flicker of sympathy. In that moment, with 48 hours until everything she'd ever known disappeared, Veronica Fenro made the decision that would change everything. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Veronica Fenro had made a career out of impossible decisions, but standing in that boardroom, staring at a maintenance worker who'd inadvertently become witness to her family's potential downfall, she was about to make the most impossible decision of her life. The silence stretched uncomfortably as board members shifted in their leather chairs, unsure whether they were witnessing a mental breakdown or a stroke of genius. Harold Brennan cleared his throat, preparing to explain his desperate strategy, but Veronica raised one perfectly manicured hand to silence him. She walked across the room with predatory grace, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown to Judgment Day. Alex Thornwell remained exactly where he was, neither advancing nor retreating, his dark eyes following her approach with the calm attention of someone accustomed to being scrutinized by authority figures. When she stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could smell her expensive perfume, something sophisticated and cold, like winter roses mixed with steel, the height difference was minimal. In her 4-inch heels, she nearly matched his 6'2" frame, creating an equality of stature that felt symbolic of the moment's surreal nature. "Mr. Thornwell," she said, her voice carrying the dangerous sweetness that usually preceded hostile takeovers or competitor destruction. "You've been listening to our conversation." It wasn't a question. Alex nodded once, neither apologizing nor making excuses. "I was performing my duties, ma'am. I couldn't help but overhear." "And what, exactly, did you overhear?" "That Pinnacle Luxury Resorts will cease to exist as a Fenro company in 48 hours unless you marry before your 35th birthday." His response was matter-of-fact, neither judgmental nor sympathetic. Simply accurate. Several board members winced at the brutal summary of their predicament. Veronica's lips curved into something that might have been a smile if it had contained any warmth. Remarkably concise. You understand complex business situations quickly for someone who empties trash cans for a living. The insult was delivered with surgical precision, designed to put him in his place, to remind everyone in the room of the vast gulf between a billionaire heiress and a night janitor. But Alex's expression didn't change. He'd clearly endured worse. I understand that desperate situations require desperate solutions, he replied calmly. I also understand that you're considering asking me to marry you. The directness of his statement sent a shock wave through the boardroom. Several members gasped audibly. Margaret Sterling nearly choked on her coffee. Even Harold Brennan, who'd been mentally preparing this exact conversation, looked stunned that the janitor had cut straight to the heart of the matter. Veronica's eyes narrowed. She'd expected embarrassment, stammering, maybe even a hasty retreat. She hadn't expected this quiet competence that seemed completely unimpressed by either her wealth or her desperation. "And what makes you think," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that made grown executives sweat, "that I would ever consider marrying someone so far beneath my social station?" "Because," Alex replied with infuriating calm, 47. "Hours from now, you won't have a social station left to protect." The accuracy of his assessment hit like a physical blow. Several board members shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the truth they'd been dancing around for the past hour. Veronica felt her carefully constructed control begin to crack. "You have no idea who you're talking to," she said, her voice rising with the kind of authority that had made competitors flee and subordinates tremble. "I am Veronica Fenro. My family built this company when your grandfather was probably shoveling coal for a living. I have a Harvard MBA, controlling interest in 37 luxury properties, and a net worth that exceeds the GDP of small nations." Alex listened to this recitation of achievements without visible reaction, then asked quietly, "And how much will all of that be worth on Thursday morning?" The question hung in the air like a sword. Everyone in the room knew the answer, but hearing it spoken aloud by the maintenance staff felt like the final insult in a day full of them. "I could have you fired right now," Veronica said, her voice trembling with rage and something that might have been panic. "One word from me, and you'll never work in this city again." "Yes, ma'am, you could." Alex's acknowledgement was neither defiant nor submissive, but that won't solve your problem. "Harold." Brennan finally found his voice. "Veronica, perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No." She cut him off without taking her eyes off Alex. "If we're going to discuss the unthinkable, we'll discuss it openly." She began to pace, her controlled movements reminding everyone in the room of a caged predator. "You want to know what the unthinkable is, Mr. Thornwell. The unthinkable is that I, Veronica Elizabeth Fenro, might actually have to marry a janitor to save my company." The words were designed to wound, to establish the hierarchy, to make it clear that any such arrangement would be an act of charity on her part. But Alex's expression remained unchanged. "The unthinkable," she continued, building momentum like a prosecutor delivering a closing argument, "is that someone who cleans toilets for a living might end up with access to a fortune he could never earn in 1,000 lifetimes." She stopped directly in front of him again, close enough that he could see the fury and desperation warring in her green eyes. "The unthinkable is that I might actually be desperate enough to consider it." The boardroom was so quiet that the building's ventilation system sounded like a roar. Everyone waited to see how the maintenance worker would respond to being offered the opportunity of several lifetimes while simultaneously being insulted in ways that would have sent most men running for the exits. Alex studied her face for a long moment, reading something in her expression that others might have missed. When he spoke, his voice was gentle in a way that somehow made his words more devastating than any anger could have been. "Miss Fenro, I've been cleaning offices in this city for 6 years. I've seen a lot of powerful people having a lot of bad days. But I've never seen someone work so hard to convince themselves that they're better than a situation they're trapped in. The observation struck home with surgical precision. Veronica's face flushed, whether with embarrassment or rage. It was impossible to tell. "You think you understand me?" she asked, her voice dangerous. "I think," Alex replied carefully, "that you're scared. I think you've never been in a situation where money and power couldn't solve your problems. I think you're lashing out at me because I'm safe to attack, just a janitor who can't fight back without losing his job." The accuracy of his assessment was terrifying. Several board members looked away, uncomfortable with witnessing their CEO being psychoanalyzed by the help. "But mostly," Alex continued, "I think you're angry at yourself for being in a position where marrying a stranger is your only option." Veronica stared at him with a mixture of shock and something that might have been respect. In 34 years of life, surrounded by yes-men and sycophants, very few people had ever spoken to her with such unflinching honesty. "So," she said, finally, her voice regaining some of its authoritative edge, "what do you propose, Mr. Thornwell? Are you going to save me from my predicament?" Alex set down his trash bag with deliberate care, giving himself a moment to consider his response. When he looked back at her, there was something different in his expression. A decision being made. "I propose," he said quietly, "that we stop pretending this is about charity or desperation or social stations. You need a husband. I'm legally eligible. The question isn't whether I'm good enough for you. The question is whether this arrangement serves both our interests." The shift in tone was remarkable. Suddenly, this wasn't a powerful woman condescending to a lowly employee. It was two adults discussing a mutually beneficial agreement. And what interests would those be? Veronica asked, her curiosity clearly piqued despite herself. "That," Alex replied with a slight smile that transformed his entire face, "is something we should discuss privately. Assuming, of course, that you're actually serious about this proposal, and not just amusing yourself by humiliating the help." The challenge was subtle but unmistakable. He'd just called her bluff, forcing her to either commit to the insane plan or admit she'd been wasting everyone's time. Veronica looked around the boardroom at 12 people who were witnessing either the most brilliant solution in corporate history or the most spectacular breakdown of a CEO under pressure. "Mr. Brennan," she said without taking her eyes off Alex, "clear the boardroom. Mr. Thornwell and I need to discuss terms." The boardroom emptied with the efficient speed of executives who understood when they were witnessing history in the making. Harold Brennan was the last to leave, pausing at the door with a concerned expression that spoke of decades, watching Fenro family members make decisions that would either be remembered as brilliant or catastrophic. "Veronica," he said quietly, "are you certain about this?" She turned from the floor-to-ceiling windows where she'd been staring out at the Phoenix skyline, her reflection ghost-like against the afternoon sun. "I've never been certain about anything in my life, Harold. But certainty is a luxury I can't afford right now." The door closed with a soft click, leaving Veronica alone with Alex Thornwell and the weight of 4 generations of family history pressing down on her shoulders. Like a physical force, she remained by the windows, using the reflection to study the man who might become her husband in less than 48 hours. He'd taken a seat at the conference table, his posture relaxed but alert, neither presumptuous nor intimidated by the opulent surroundings that made most people nervous. "Before we discuss terms," she said without turning around, "you should understand exactly what you'd be marrying into, what you'd be saving." Her voice carried a different quality now, less authority, more exhaustion. The weight of maintaining perfection for 34 years was showing cracks. "My great-grandfather, Theodore Fenro, built the first Pinnacle Hotel in 1924 with money borrowed from his wife's family and a determination that bordered on obsession. The Desert Palace in downtown Phoenix, it's still operating, still profitable. still the flagship of everything we've built since. She turned from the window, beginning a slow circuit of the boardroom that felt like a ritual of remembrance. Her fingers trailed along the mahogany table that had hosted a century of family decisions. Theodore wasn't born wealthy. His father was a railroad worker. His mother took in laundry to make ends meet. But he had vision. He could see what Phoenix would become when it was still just a dusty frontier town. He mortgaged everything, borrowed against property he didn't own, and convinced his wife's father to invest in what everyone thought was a fool's dream. Alex listened without interruption, recognizing that this wasn't a business presentation, but something more personal, a woman trying to justify why preserving a legacy was worth marrying a stranger. The hotel was an immediate success. Theodore had understood something that his competitors missed. Luxury wasn't just about expensive furnishings and fancy food. It was about making people feel special, important, worthy of the best life had. To offer, every detail mattered. Every guest was treated like royalty. Her circuit brought her to a portrait hanging on the far wall, a stern-faced man in a 1920s suit, standing proudly in front of an elegant hotel facade. Theodore Fenro looked like a man who'd never doubted a decision in his life. By 1930 there were 3 pinnacle hotels. By 1948, Theodore had revolutionized hospitality, but more than that, he'd created something lasting. A family legacy that would employ thousands, serve millions, and stand as proof that vision and determination could build empires. She paused at another portrait, a woman in 1940s elegant dress, beautiful but with shadows in her eyes that suggested the cost of being married to an empire builder. That's Eleanor, Theodore's wife. She gave up her own dreams of being a concert pianist to support his vision. Their marriage was strategic, arranged by their families to combine her family's money with his ambition. But somewhere along the way, they found love, real love, the kind that survives everything the world throws at it. Alex studied the portrait, noting the way Eleanor's hand rested on Theodore's shoulder with possessive pride. They look happy. They were, for 34 years, until Eleanor died of tuberculosis. Theodore never remarried. He poured all his grief into building the company, expanding across the country, establishing the standards that still define luxury hospitality today. She moved to the next generation, a man in a 1950s military uniform standing beside a woman in a wedding dress. My grandfather, William Fenro, Theodore's only son. He inherited the company at 28 when Theodore died of a heart attack, probably from overwork and heartbreak. William was different from his father, more cautious, more concerned with preservation than expansion. He married my grandmother, Patricia, for love rather than strategy. Her voice softened as she looked at Patricia's portrait. Grandmother Patricia was the first Fenro woman to take an active role in the business. She handled interior design, staff training, the details that made guests feel at home. Under their joint leadership, Pinnacle became synonymous with family, values, and personal service. But William made one crucial mistake. He added the matrimonial clause to the family trust. He'd seen too many family businesses torn apart by heirs who married poorly, who brought in spouses that diluted the family vision, or created conflicts that destroyed what previous generations had built. Alex frowned. So the clause was meant to ensure stable marriages? It was meant to ensure that controlling interest only passed to heirs who demonstrated commitment to family stability. Marriage as proof of maturity, responsibility, readiness to continue the legacy. Her laugh was bitter. William couldn't have foreseen how marriage itself would change, how the social expectations of the 1950s would become obstacles in the 2020s. She moved to more recent portraits, her parents, looking glamorous and powerful in 1980s style. My father, Richard Fenro. He inherited the company at 30 after marrying my mother, Catherine Sterling, In what the society pages called the wedding of the decade, two hospitality dynasties joining forces, creating something even more powerful. But as she stared at her parents' portrait, her expression hardened. What the society pages didn't cover was how quickly love can turn to strategy, and how strategy can turn to warfare. My parents' marriage was perfect for the first 10 years. They expanded internationally, established Pinnacle as a global luxury brand, had me as the heir apparent. She touched her mother's face in the portrait with one finger, a gesture so tender it revealed depths of pain she usually kept hidden. Then my mother discovered that my father had been having affairs. Not just one, affairs, plural, for years. With employees, with competitors' wives, with anyone who made him feel powerful and desired in ways that marriage apparently couldn't. Alex saw her shoulders tense, the corporate armor sliding back into place as she approached painful territory. The divorce was vicious. Not because of the money. Prenups protected most of the family assets, but because my mother fought for controlling interest in the company. She argued that she'd contributed equally to Pinnacle's success, that the matrimonial clause shouldn't apply if the marriage ended due to the husband's infidelity. Who won? My father, technically. The trust language was ironclad. Controlling interest remained with the Fenro bloodline, regardless of divorce. But my mother won the war. She took her settlement and started a competing luxury chain, Sterling Hospitality Group. She spent the next 15 years systematically poaching our best employees, our most exclusive locations, our most valuable clients. Veronica's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. She destroyed my father professionally and personally. He started drinking, making increasingly desperate business decisions, until he finally died of liver failure when I was 25. I inherited a company that was bleeding money, reputation, and market share. But you saved it. She turned to look at him, surprised by the certainty in his voice. How do you know that? Because we're standing in a boardroom on the 47th floor of a building that bears your family's name, discussing a company worth billions rather than the remnants of a failed empire. You didn't just inherit Pinnacle, you rebuilt it. The observation was accurate and somehow comforting. It took 9 years. 9 years of 18-hour days, of learning every aspect of the business, of proving to employees and competitors and board members that I wasn't just Richard Fenro's daughter trading on Daddy's legacy. She returned to her position by the windows, using the reflection to avoid direct eye contact while revealing the most personal part of her story. I swore I would never make my parents' mistakes, never let emotion cloud business judgment, never trust anyone enough to be betrayed. I dated strategically, entered relationships that enhanced the company's profile, ended them when they stopped being mutually beneficial, including Harrison Blackwood and Blackwood. Especially Harrison, her reflection smiled without humor. Our engagement was perfect on paper. Two hospitality empires merging, creating economies of scale and market dominance that would have revolutionized luxury travel. Harrison brought shipping connections and international properties. I brought landholdings and brand recognition, but no love. Love is a luxury that CEOs can't afford. Love makes you vulnerable. Love makes you stupid. Love makes you trust people who will inevitably disappoint you. The words came out like a recitation, something she'd told herself so often it had become doctrine. Alex was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she'd revealed. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but direct. So why are you telling me this? Why does a janitor you met an hour ago need to understand 4 generations of family history? She turned to face him fully, her green eyes bright with unshed tears. She was too proud to let fall. Because in 46 hours, everything my family built could disappear. Because I'm about to ask you to enter into a marriage that's purely strategic, knowing that strategic marriages destroyed both my parents. Because I need you to understand that saving Pinnacle isn't just about preserving wealth. It's about honoring the sacrifices of everyone who came before us. And because, she added so quietly he almost missed it, I need you to know that I've never trusted anyone enough to tell them this story. If we're going to do this impossible thing, you deserve to know exactly who you're saving. Alex Thornwell sat in the leather executive chair that probably cost more than he made in 6 months, watching Veronica Fenro wrestle with generations of family pressure and personal pain. Her story had revealed depths he hadn't expected, not just wealth and privilege, but genuine love for something larger than herself. Now, he said quietly, let me tell you who you'd be marrying. Veronica returned to the conference table, taking a seat across from him with the cautious attention of someone preparing for either revelation or disappointment. She'd gambled everything on his response to her desperate proposal, but she realized she knew nothing about the man who might become her husband. Alex steepled his fingers, considering how to compress a lifetime of choices into an explanation that would help her understand what she was getting into. 12 years ago, I was Captain Alexander Thornwell, United States Army Corps of Engineers, stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I had a mechanical engineering degree from Virginia Tech, specialized training in infrastructure development, and a promising career designing power grids and water systems for forward operating bases. The transformation of his voice was subtle but unmistakable, the careful neutrality of a service worker, giving way to the confident cadence of someone accustomed to briefing senior officers and making decisions that affected hundreds of lives. Veronica's eyes widened slightly. Whatever she'd expected from her night janitor's backstory, military leadership hadn't been on the list. I wasn't career Army initially. I'd planned to serve 4 years, get my education benefits, then transition to civilian engineering. But I discovered I was good at military logistics, really good. I could see how systems interconnected, how fixing one problem could prevent 3 others, how efficient resource allocation could mean the difference between mission success and disaster. He stood and moved to the windows, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle as afternoon faded toward evening. By my 8th year, I was on track for major, possibly lieutenant colonel. I'd served 3 deployments in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq, building infrastructure that kept our people alive and operational. I loved the work, loved the responsibility, loved being part of something bigger than myself. What changed? Veronica asked, though she suspected she already knew. Men didn't go from military careers to maintenance work without significant personal trauma. I got married. Sarah Mitchell, a nurse I met during a rotation at Walter Reed. She was beautiful, intelligent, dedicated to helping people. We had the kind of whirlwind romance that military families specialize in, intense, passionate, built on the knowledge that time together is always limited by deployment schedules. His reflection in the window showed a slight smile, a ghost of happier memories. We got married after 6 months of dating. Sarah was willing to be a military wife, to handle the separations and uncertainty that came with my career. For 2 years, it worked perfectly. We were planning to start a family, maybe buy a house near the base, build the kind of stable life that military couples dream about. But the smile faded as he reached the difficult part of his story. Then Sarah got pregnant. Emma was born in March 2018, the most beautiful baby you've ever seen. Sarah was an amazing mother, patient, nurturing, everything you'd want for your daughter. I took leave when Emma was born, spent 3 weeks just marveling at this perfect little person we'd created. Veronica heard the past tense and felt her stomach clench. This was heading toward tragedy, the kind of loss that explained how a military officer became a night janitor. When Emma was 4 months old, I got deployment orders. 7 months in Afghanistan, working on a major infrastructure project. Standard rotation, nothing unusual. Sarah supported the deployment. She knew it was important for my career, and she'd handled my previous deployments just fine. Alex turned from the window, meeting Veronica's eyes directly. I left when Emma was 5 months old. Sarah brought her to the base for the farewell ceremony, and I remember thinking how lucky I was. Amazing wife, beautiful daughter, meaningful. Work that served my country, life was perfect. 3 weeks into my deployment, I got the call that every military spouse dreads. Car accident. Sarah had been driving to her sister's house with Emma, hit by a drunk driver running a red light. Sarah died at the scene. Emma was critical, traumatic brain injury, multiple surgeries required, uncertain prognosis. The raw pain in his voice made Veronica's chest tighten. She'd shared her family's business struggles, but this was genuine human tragedy. I was on a transport home within 12 hours, but those 12 hours felt like 12 years. When I got to the hospital, Emma was in a coma, connected to machines that were keeping her alive. The doctors weren't sure she'd survive, and if she did survive, they couldn't predict what kind of recovery she might have. Alex returned to his seat, his hands clasped tightly on the polished table surface. For 6 weeks, I lived in that hospital. I learned about traumatic brain injuries, about rehabilitation protocols, about the kind of round-the-clock care that Emma would need if she recovered. The Army granted extended compassionate leave, but I knew my military career was effectively over. Did she recover? She did. Emma is now 11 years old, in 6th grade, and brilliant despite the challenges she faces. The brain injury affected her motor coordination and speech development, but not her intelligence. She needs special education support, physical therapy, occupational therapy. She needs a parent who can be present, consistent, available. The picture was becoming clear. You chose her over your career. It wasn't really a choice. The military couldn't provide the stability Emma needed. Deployments were out of the question. Even stateside assignments meant long hours, frequent transfers, the kind of uncertainty that would have been devastating for a daughter recovering from trauma. Alex's voice carried no self-pity, just matter-of-fact acceptance of circumstances beyond his control. I resigned my commission, used my savings to move to Phoenix where Emma could receive excellent care at the Barrow Neurological Institute. I needed work that provided health insurance, but allowed flexible scheduling for therapy appointments, school conferences, the constant medical management that Emma's condition requires. So you became a janitor. I became whatever was necessary. To be Emma's father first and everything else second. Janitorial work pays reasonably well, especially night shifts that allow me to be available during Emma's school hours. The job provides excellent health insurance through the building management company, and most importantly, it allows me to be home when she needs me. Veronica studied his face, seeing something she hadn't expected, not shame or regret about. His career change, but quiet pride in choices made for love rather than ambition. For 6 years, that's been my life. Emma's therapies, her education, her gradual progress toward independence. I've watched her learn to walk again, to speak clearly, to read at grade level despite the challenges. She's extraordinary and she deserves every sacrifice I've made. Where is she now? With Mrs. Rodriguez, our neighbor who watches her when I work night shifts. Emma does her homework, practices piano. She's remarkably musical for someone with motor coordination challenges, and usually falls asleep reading robotics magazines. She wants to be an engineer someday, to build things that help people with disabilities. The love in his voice was unmistakable, and Veronica felt something twist in her chest, envy, perhaps, for the kind of uncomplicated devotion she'd never experienced. So when you consider marrying me, Alex continued, you need to understand that Emma comes first, always. Any arrangement we make has to account for her needs, her schedule, her future. I won't compromise her well-being for any amount of money or social position. You'd be giving up anonymity, Veronica pointed out. Marriage to me means media attention, public scrutiny. Emma's story becomes part of the narrative. I've considered that. Emma is strong enough to handle attention, especially if it comes with resources that could improve her life. Better medical care, educational opportunities, maybe even funding for the assistive technology research she's interested in. Alex leaned forward slightly, his expression serious. But you need to understand, I'm not looking to be rescued from my current life. I'm not ashamed of being a janitor, and I'm not desperate for wealth or status. If we do this, it's because it serves both our needs, not because I'm grateful for the opportunity to marry above my station. The directness of his statement was both impressive and slightly unsettling. Veronica had expected gratitude, maybe even awe at the opportunity she was offering. Instead, she was getting a negotiation between equals. "What would you want from this arrangement?" she asked. Security for Emma, medical insurance that covers all her therapies without copays or coverage limits, educational trust fund that ensures she can attend any college, pursue any career path her abilities allow, legal protection through marriage that gives me standing to advocate for her interests if anything happens to me. He paused, considering his next words carefully. And respect. If we're going to be married, even for business purposes, I want to be treated as a partner, not a charity case or a convenient solution to your problems. Veronica felt a flutter of something that might have been respect. In a single conversation, Alex Thornwell had proven more emotionally mature and psychologically stable than most of the men she'd dated in the past decade. "There's something else you should know," Alex said quietly, "about why I'm willing to consider this arrangement." "What's that?" "I've been watching you for 6 months, Miss Fenro. Not stalking," he added quickly, seeing her expression, but observing. "I work in this building. I see how you treat people, how you handle pressure, how you make decisions." He met her eyes directly. "You're not the cold, heartless executive that the media portrays. You stay late to help junior employees with projects. You remember the names of security guards and maintenance staff. You tip the food service workers better than any other executive in this building." Veronica felt heat rise in her cheeks, uncomfortable with being seen so clearly. "Most importantly," Alex continued, "you keep your word. When you promise something, you deliver. That matters too. Someone like me, someone whose daughter's future depends on being able to trust the adults in her life." The compliment was unexpected and somehow more meaningful than any flowery praise she'd ever received. "So," Alex concluded, "when I consider marrying you, I'm not just considering a business arrangement. I'm considering partnership with someone I've already observed to be trustworthy, intelligent, and fundamentally decent despite the circumstances that brought us to this conversation." Veronica stared at him for a long moment, realizing that her desperate gamble might have accidentally connected her with exactly the kind of person she'd spent 34 years avoiding, someone who saw her clearly and chose to stay anyway. Boardroom had taken on the quality of a confession booth. Two people who'd been strangers an hour earlier now, sitting across from each other with their deepest truths laid bare between them. The afternoon sun had shifted, casting longer shadows across the polished table where Veronica Fenro and Alex Thornwell were negotiating the most unusual business arrangement in corporate history. Veronica studied the man who might become her husband in less than 48 hours. Everything about this situation defied logic, violated every principle of careful decision-making she'd learned in business school. Yet somehow, listening to Alex's story about choosing his daughter over his military career, she felt more confident about this choice than she had about her engagement to Harrison Blackwood. "Before we go any further," she said, pulling out her phone, "I need to make a call. Harold needs to coordinate the legal logistics if we're actually doing this." But Alex held up a hand, stopping her mid-dial. "Before you call anyone, there's something else we need to discuss." His tone had shifted slightly, becoming more formal, more careful. Veronica set down her phone, sensing that whatever came next would be crucial. "Miss Fenro, I've told you about my background, my situation with Emma, my reasons for considering this arrangement. But I haven't told you the most important thing, which is... Alex stood and moved to the window wall, but this time he wasn't looking out at the city. Instead, he was studying the architectural plans framed along the boardroom walls, detailed. Blueprints of various pinnacle properties, technical drawings that most people would find incomprehensible. "I know these plans," he said quietly, pointing to a complex infrastructure schematic for the Desert Palace Hotel. "Not just as someone who's worked in the building industry, but specifically. I helped design the power grid updates for this property 3 years ago." Veronica frowned, not understanding the significance. "I'm sure many contractors worked on that project." "Not as a contractor." Alex turned to face her, his expression serious. "As a consulting engineer for Morrison Technical Solutions." Under the name Alexander Mitchell, I was still using my late wife's surname then, before I legally changed back to Thornwell. The name Morrison Technical Solutions sent a jolt of recognition through Veronica's memory. It was the consulting firm that had handled several major infrastructure upgrades across pinnacle properties, including the complex electrical and VAIC modernizations that had improved efficiency by 30% while reducing operational costs by millions of dollars annually. "That's impossible," she said slowly. "Morrison Technical only worked with senior engineers, people with advanced degrees and extensive experience in luxury hospitality systems." Alex moved to a filing cabinet along the wall, pulling out a folder that contained detailed technical specifications for the building's infrastructure. He opened it to a page covered with complex engineering calculations, annotations, and system modifications. Section 4.3, Subsystem Modifications for Peak Load. "Distribution during convention occupancy," he said, pointing to handwritten notes in the margin. "I wrote those calculations. The original design called for a 15% increase in generator capacity, but I determined that smart load balancing could achieve the same result with only a 6% increase, saving Pinnacle approximately $1.2 million in equipment costs." Veronica stared at the technical drawings, recognizing the handwriting from modification notes she'd personally approved 3 years earlier. "But the Morrison technical engineers we worked with were all all highly credentialed professionals with impressive resumes and corporate positions," Alex finished. "And I was one of them. Alexander Mitchell, Senior Infrastructure Engineer, specializing in hospitality and commercial properties." He returned to his seat, his demeanor now carrying hints of the professional authority he'd once wielded. "After Emma's accident, I couldn't maintain a full-time engineering position, but Morrison Technical hired me as an independent contractor for specific projects. Flexible scheduling, work-from-home capability, complex problem-solving that could be done during Emma's school hours. For 3 years, I've been consulting on various Pinnacle projects, not just infrastructure, but operational efficiency, cost reduction, system optimization. I know your properties better than most of your own staff because I've studied every mechanical, electrical, and structural system across 12 locations." The revelation was staggering. Veronica's mind raced through implications, connections. The bizarre coincidence that had placed a consultant she'd unknowingly worked with into her most desperate hour. "The Morrison technical work ended 18 months ago," Alex continued. "Emma's needs became more complex, requiring more consistent presence, and I couldn't maintain even the flexible schedule that consulting required. I took the maintenance position because it provided security and allowed me to be the father Emma needed, but you kept all the technical knowledge. You don't forget 15 years of engineering training because you change jobs. I still read industry journals, follow developments in hospitality infrastructure, maintain my professional certifications. Emma's interested in engineering. We work on projects together, theoretical designs for accessibility improvements." Veronica felt a strange combination of shock and vindication. Her instincts about Alex had been correct. There was something different about him, something that suggested capabilities beyond his current position. But the reality was even more extraordinary than she'd suspected. "So when you offered to marry me," Alex said, "you weren't just offering marriage to a janitor. You were offering marriage to someone who understands your business, who's contributed to its success, who knows exactly what preserving Pinnacle Luxury Resorts means from both operational and financial perspectives." The implications were profound. Marriage to Alex wouldn't just fulfill the trust requirements. It would bring genuine business expertise back into the company, knowledge that had already proven valuable. "There's more," Alex continued, opening another folder. "During my consulting work, I identified several operational inefficiencies that could save Pinnacle approximately $12 million annually. I prepared recommendations, but Morrison Technical's contract ended before I could present them. He handed her a detailed report, professionally bound, with the kind of comprehensive analysis that would typically cost hundreds of thousands of dollars from a top-tier consulting firm. $12 million in cost savings? Veronica flipped through the report, recognizing the quality of analysis that had made Morrison Technical Consultations so valuable. Conservative estimate. The report covers energy management, staff scheduling optimization, supply chain improvements, and guest service. Technologies that could improve satisfaction scores while reducing operational costs. Veronica set down the report, staring at Alex with new understanding. "You've been planning this?" "No," he said quietly. "I've been surviving, doing whatever work I could find that met Emma's needs. But when you asked me to consider marriage, I realized I had more to offer than just legal eligibility." He leaned forward, his voice taking on the confident tone of someone presenting a business proposal. "If we do this, Veronica, it's not charity. It's partnership. You get a husband who fulfills the trust requirements, but you also get an engineer who understands your business, who's already contributed to its success, who can help you build something even better." The boardroom felt different now, not like a desperate negotiation between unequal parties, but like a strategic planning session between potential partners. Veronica's mind was already racing through possibilities, seeing how Alex's expertise could be integrated back into Pinnacle's operations. "Emma," she said suddenly, "your daughter, how does she feel about your engineering background? Does she know what you gave up?" Alex's expression softened. "Emma knows I was a soldier and an engineer before she got hurt. She knows I chose to be her dad over everything else. But she also knows that choosing her didn't make me less intelligent or less capable. It just changed my priorities. She's actually excited about the possibility that I might get to use my engineering skills again. Emma believes in fixing things and making systems work better. The idea that her dad might help make hotels more efficient and accessible appeals to her sense of justice." Veronica felt something shift in her chest, a recognition that this arrangement might not be desperate after all, but strategic in ways she hadn't imagined. "The board," she said slowly, "is going to be shocked." "The board," Alex replied with a slight smile, "is going to discover that sometimes the best solutions come from unexpected sources. They've been working with my expertise for years without knowing it. Now they'll get to work with it directly." He stood and moved to the whiteboard at the far end of the room, picking up a marker with the casual authority of someone accustomed to presenting complex ideas to decision makers. "If I may, I'd like to show you something that could change how Pinnacle approaches sustainability and cost management." For the next 30 minutes, Alex Thornwell transformed from night janitor to consulting engineer, outlining innovations that could revolutionize hospitality operations. His ideas were sophisticated, practical, and immediately implementable. More importantly, they demonstrated a deep understanding of Pinnacle's culture, values, and operational philosophy. Veronica watched him present with growing amazement. This wasn't just technical competence. This was vision, leadership, the kind of strategic thinking that built successful companies. When he finished, setting down the marker and turning to face her, the question wasn't whether she should marry him. The question was why it had taken a crisis to bring someone of his caliber back into her company. "Alex," she said quietly, "I need to ask you something directly." "Of course." "Forget about the trust requirements. Forget about saving the company. Forget about everything external. Do you want to marry me? Not as a business arrangement, not as a solution to our respective problems, but as a person?" The question hung between them, more intimate than anything they'd discussed, despite the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. Alex studied her face for a long moment, seeing past the CEO armor to something more vulnerable. Underneath. "Veronica, 6 hours ago, if someone had asked me to describe the perfect woman, I would have said someone kind, intelligent, devoted to family, and strong enough to handle life's challenges without losing her essential goodness." He moved closer, close enough that she could see the sincerity in his dark eyes. "I wouldn't have said billionaire CEO, because I thought wealth and power made that kind of goodness impossible. But watching you today, seeing how you've fought to preserve something your family built, how you've considered Emma's needs in every part of this conversation, how you've treated me as an equal despite every social convention suggesting otherwise. I think," he said softly, "that I could not just marry you, but love you. And more importantly, I think Emma could love you, too." The admission hit Veronica like a physical force. In 34 years, no one had ever seen her clearly enough to fall in love with the person beneath the power and position. "So yes," Alex concluded, "if you're asking whether I want to marry you, the answer is yes. Not just as a business arrangement, but as the beginning of something that could become extraordinary." Veronica stood and moved to face him, close enough that she had to look up slightly to meet his eyes. "Then let's call Harold back in here. We have a wedding to plan and apparently a company to revolutionize." As she reached for her phone to summon the board, Veronica realized that what had started as the worst crisis of her life might actually be the best thing that had ever happened to her. Harold Brennan returned to the boardroom with the cautious expression of someone expecting either breakthrough or complete breakdown. The other board members followed in his wake, their faces reflecting the anxiety of people whose careers hung in the balance of whatever decision had been reached during the private conference. "Ladies and gentlemen," Veronica announced, standing at the head of the table with renewed authority, "I'm pleased to inform you that we have a solution to our crisis. Mr. Thornwell has agreed to marry me, fulfilling the trust requirements and preserving Pinnacle Luxury Resorts as a Fenro company." The silence that followed was profound. Several board members looked between Veronica and Alex, trying to process the unprecedented announcement. Margaret Sterling was the first to find her voice. "Veronica, are you certain about this? The legal implications, the media attention, the potential complications have all been considered." Veronica cut her off smoothly. "Mr. Thornwell and I have discussed the arrangement extensively. We're both committed to making this work for the benefit of the company and all stakeholders involved." Alex remained seated at the conference table, his posture relaxed but attentive. He hadn't changed back into his maintenance uniform, still wearing the dress shirt and slacks that somehow made him look less like an employee and more like what he actually was, a professional consulting on a complex business problem. Chief Financial Officer David Martinez pulled out his tablet, fingers already flying across the screen as he calculated implications. "The logistics alone are staggering. We need marriage licenses, legal documentation, witnesses, efficient, and we need it all completed before Thursday morning. That's 36 hours from now. Nevada marriage law requires no waiting period," legal counsel Patricia Wong observed, her voice clinical as she worked through practical requirements. "We could fly to Las Vegas tonight, complete the ceremony tomorrow, return with documentation that satisfies the trust requirements, Harold Brennan studied Alex with the intense scrutiny of someone trying to solve a puzzle. "Mr. Thornwell, I have to ask, what exactly do you get out of this arrangement? Surely you understand the magnitude of what you're agreeing to." Alex met the older man's gaze directly. "Mr. Brennan, I get the opportunity to help preserve something valuable that employs thousands of people and serves millions of customers. I get security for my daughter and the chance to contribute professionally to a company I respect. Most importantly, I get to partner with someone I admire." The answer was perfect, neither grasping nor self-deprecating, acknowledging the benefits while emphasizing service and partnership. Several board members exchanged glances, recognizing that Alex's response demonstrated sophistication they hadn't expected from a janitor. "There's something else," Veronica said, moving to the whiteboard where Alex's efficiency recommendations were still visible. During our conversation, Mr. Thornwell revealed information that significantly changes his value to this company. She gestured to the complex diagrams and calculations covering the white surface. "Mr. Thornwell is actually Alexander Mitchell, the senior engineer from Morrison Technical Solutions, who designed many of our infrastructure upgrades over the past 3 years. His work has already saved Pinnacle over $2 million in operational costs." The revelation hit the boardroom like a seismic shock. Harold Brennan's eyes widened as recognition dawned. "Alexander Mitchell, you're the engineer who redesigned the Desert Palace power grid? The one who solved the peak load problems that had been plaguing us for years?" Alex nodded modestly. "Among other projects, I've worked on 12 Pinnacle properties, focusing on efficiency improvements and cost reduction. Margaret Sterling leaned forward, her financial mind already grasping the implications. "The Morrison Technical Consultations were some of our best investments. Their recommendations consistently exceeded projected savings by significant margins. If Mr. Thornwell was the engineer behind those successes," David Martinez added, pulling up financial records on his tablet, "then we're not just getting a husband to fulfill trust requirements. We're getting proven expertise that could revolutionize our operations." Alex raised a hand slightly, drawing attention back to himself. His voice carried quiet authority when he spoke. "I appreciate the recognition, but I want to be clear about something. I didn't reveal my background to make myself seem more valuable or worthy of this arrangement. I revealed it because partnership should be built on honesty." He stood and moved to the window, his reflection showing calm determination. "6 years ago, I left engineering to be the father my daughter needed. I became a janitor because that job allowed me to provide for her while being present for her recovery. I'm not ashamed of that work, and I don't need validation from my previous career to justify my worth." The statement was delivered without defensiveness or false modesty, simply truth spoken with quiet dignity. "But," Alex continued, turning back to face the board, "if Veronica and I are going to be married, if I'm going to be part of this company's leadership, then my engineering experience becomes relevant. Not because it makes me good enough for her, but because it allows me to contribute meaningfully to our shared success." Harold Brennan found himself genuinely impressed. In 40 years of corporate leadership, he'd rarely encountered someone who could navigate ego and humility so skillfully. "Mr. Thornwell," he said formally, "speaking for the board, I want to apologize for any assumptions we may have made about your background or capabilities. It appears we've significantly underestimated both." Alex's slight smile was gracious without being smug. "No apology necessary, Mr. Brennan. I've learned that people see what they expect to see. A man in a janitor's uniform is assumed to be just a janitor. That's not malicious, it's human nature." Veronica watched this exchange with growing admiration. Alex was handling the board's shock and recognition with exactly the right balance of confidence and humility. He was claiming his expertise without diminishing his recent work, accepting praise without becoming arrogant. "The wedding logistics," Patricia Wong interrupted. Her legal mind focused on practical requirements, need immediate attention. If we're doing this, we need to move quickly. I'll handle the arrangements, Veronica said decisively. Private jet to Las Vegas tonight, ceremony tomorrow morning, return by afternoon with all necessary documentation. What about Emma? Alex asked, the question revealing his priorities even in the midst of corporate crisis. My daughter needs to be part of this process. She's not just gaining financial security, she's potentially gaining a stepmother. The consideration was touching and practical. Veronica felt a flutter of nervousness at the prospect of meeting the 11-year-old girl who was clearly the center of Alex's universe. Of course, she said quickly. Emma should be with us. This affects her life as much as ours. Alex pulled out his phone, checking the time. She's at school until 3:30. I need to arrange coverage for tonight and tomorrow. Speak with her teachers about the absence. Make sure she understands what's happening. Take my car, Veronica offered immediately. Take whatever time you need. We'll finalize the travel arrangements while you handle Emma's needs. The offer was made without calculation, pure instinct to support someone handling family responsibilities. Alex's expression showed surprise and appreciation. Thank you. That means more than you might realize. As Alex gathered his things to leave, Harold Brennan approached Veronica privately. Are you absolutely certain about this? Beyond the trust requirements, beyond the business advantages, are you prepared for marriage to someone you met 6 hours ago? Veronica watched Alex carefully fold his engineering drawings, handling them with the same precise care he'd shown for every task since entering the boardroom. Harold, I was engaged to Harrison for 2 years, and I never felt about him the way I feel about Alex after one conversation, which is how. Respected, understood, like I'm dealing with an equal who sees me clearly and chooses to stay anyway. She paused, considering her words carefully. For the first time in my adult life, I'm making a decision based on instinct rather than strategy. And surprisingly, the instinct feels more reliable than any analysis I've ever done. Alex approached them, ready to leave but waiting respectfully for their conversation to conclude. Ms. Fenro, Veronica, I'll be back by 6 o'clock with Emma. She wants to meet you before we make any final commitments. I'd like that very much, Veronica replied, meaning it completely. After Alex left, the boardroom buzzed with energy that felt hopeful rather than panicked for the first time in days. Plans were made, logistics arranged, legal documents prepared. But underlying all the activity was a sense that they'd witnessed something remarkable, not just a business solution, but the beginning of something that might actually be extraordinary. Margaret Sterling summed up what everyone was thinking. If this works, it won't just save the company. It might actually improve it. Emma Thornwell was exactly what Veronica had expected and nothing like what she'd prepared for. At 11 years old, she possessed her father's quiet intensity and an intellectual curiosity that made her seem both younger and older than her years. When Alex brought her to the Pinnacle executive offices at 6 o'clock sharp, she walked with the careful precision of someone who'd learned to navigate the world deliberately, the slight asymmetry in her gait, legacy of her traumatic brain injury, was barely noticeable unless you knew to look for it. What was immediately apparent was her sharp intelligence and the way her dark eyes took in everything with scientific interest. So you're the lady who wants to marry my dad, Emma said without preamble, studying Veronica with the direct gaze that only children can manage without seeming rude. Veronica had faced hostile boards, intimidated competitors, and negotiated with world leaders, but being evaluated by an 11-year-old felt uniquely challenging. I am, and you must be Emma. Your father has told me wonderful things about you. He tells everyone wonderful things. About me, he's prejudiced. Emma's smile took any sting out of the observation. But I want to know why you think marrying a stranger is a good idea. Alex intervened gently. Emma, we discussed this in the car. Sometimes adults have to make difficult decisions quickly. I know about the trust and the deadline and the company, Emma replied with the matter-of-fact tone of someone accustomed to adult conversations. Dad explained the business part. I want to understand the personal part. She turned back to Veronica with startling directness. Do you love him? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Veronica found herself grateful for Emma's straightforwardness. It was easier than navigating adult diplomatic language. I don't know yet, Veronica answered honestly. I respect him tremendously. I admire his intelligence and his dedication. To you, I think he's the kind of person I could learn to love, given time. Emma considered this with the seriousness of a judge weighing evidence. That's a good answer. The wrong answer would have been yes, you can't love someone you just met, or no. Then why marry him at all? Alex looked proud and slightly embarrassed by his daughter's interrogation skills. Emma's very logical. She approaches everything like an engineering problem. Speaking of engineering, Emma said, pulling a tablet from her backpack, I want to show you something. She opened a complex CAD program, revealing detailed architectural drawings that looked remarkably sophisticated for an 11-year-old's work. These are my designs for improving hotel accessibility. Dad helped me with the structural calculations, but the concepts are mine. Veronica leaned forward, genuinely intrigued. The drawing showed innovative approaches to wheelchair accessibility, sensory accommodation for guests with disabilities, and communication systems for hearing-impaired visitors. The level of thought and detail was extraordinary. Emma, this is incredible work. How did you learn to use professional design software? Dad taught me. He says understanding how buildings work helps me understand how people work. We both need good structure, efficient systems, and backup plans when things go wrong. The analogy was both touching and insightful. Emma had clearly inherited her father's engineering mind along with a wisdom born from personal experience with systems that could fail catastrophically. If you marry Dad, Emma continued, will you let me present these ideas to your design team? Not because I'm your stepdaughter, but because they're good ideas that could help people. Veronica found herself genuinely excited by the possibilities. Emma, I would be honored to have you present to our team. These concepts could revolutionize how we think about inclusive hospitality. Alex watched this exchange with visible emotion. His daughter was being taken seriously as an intellectual equal, her ideas valued on their own merit rather than dismissed as childish enthusiasm. There's something else you should know about Emma, Alex said quietly. She's been accepted to the Arizona State University summer program for gifted students. Full scholarship based on her robotics and engineering portfolio. Emma flushed slightly at the praise, but didn't deny it. I want to study biomedical engineering, design technology that helps people with disabilities live more independently, like adaptive interfaces for brain injury patients. The personal motivation behind her career goals was clear. She wanted to help others facing challenges similar to her own. Veronica felt a wave of admiration for this remarkable young person who'd transformed personal trauma into professional purpose. Emma, Veronica said carefully, if your father and I get married, your life is going to change significantly. Media attention, different schools, probably a new home. How do you feel about that? Emma was quiet for a long moment, considering the question with characteristic thoroughness. Scared, excited, worried, hopeful. Basically every emotion at once. But Dad taught me that change isn't automatically bad. It's just different, and different can be better if you approach it thoughtfully. She looked directly at Veronica, her expression serious. I trust Dad's judgment about people. If he thinks you're worth marrying, then you probably are. But I need to know, will you try to replace my mom? The question revealed the heart of Emma's concerns. Veronica felt the weight of being trusted with something so precious and fragile. Emma, no one could replace your mother in your heart or your father's memory. I would never try. If we become a family, I'd like to be someone new in your life, not a replacement, but an addition. Someone who supports your dreams and helps you achieve them. Emma studied her for another long moment, then nodded decisively. Okay, I think we should try this. Alex looked between his daughter and the woman who might become his wife, seeing something remarkable happening. Not just acceptance, but the beginning of genuine connection. There's one more thing, Emma said, pulling out another tablet. I've been researching Pinnacle luxury resorts since Dad told me about the situation. I have some suggestions for your marketing strategy. Veronica blinked in surprise. Marketing suggestions? Your social media presence doesn't effectively engage with families traveling with disabled members. You're missing a significant market segment that has specific needs and considerable disposable income. Emma's presentation was as professional as any consulting proposal Veronica had received. Emma spent the afternoon analyzing our digital marketing, Alex explained, pride evident in his voice. She's remarkably good at identifying missed opportunities. This is extraordinary, Veronica said, studying Emma's analysis. Have you considered that you might want to study business as well as engineering? Actually, Emma replied with a grin. That made her look like the bright 11-year-old she was. I've been thinking about combined degrees. Engineering and business could be really powerful together. Veronica felt something shift in her chest, not just admiration, but protective instinct. This brilliant young person deserved every opportunity, every resource, every chance to change the world. Emma, she said impulsively, would you like to be my maid of honor tomorrow? The offer surprised everyone, including Veronica herself. But it felt right. If she was marrying Alex, she was choosing Emma as well. Emma's eyes widened, then brightened with genuine pleasure. Really? I've never been in a wedding before. Neither have I, as the bride, Veronica admitted. We can figure it out together. Alex watched this moment with an expression of wonder and gratitude. His two most important worlds were not just coexisting, but beginning to merge in ways he'd never dared hope for. So, Emma said with satisfaction, now we just need to make sure you two actually like each other enough to make this work long-term. The observation was delivered with such casual confidence that both adults burst out laughing. In the space of one conversation, an 11-year-old had managed to evaluate a complex business merger, offer professional consulting advice, and provide relationship counseling with equal competence. Emma, Veronica said with genuine warmth, I have a feeling you're going to keep us both on our toes. That's the plan, Emma replied cheerfully. Dad says the best systems have built-in quality control mechanisms. I'm yours. As they prepared to leave for Las Vegas, Veronica realized that she wasn't just gaining a husband in this arrangement. She was gaining a family. And for someone who'd spent 34 years protecting herself from emotional vulnerability, the prospect was both terrifying and exhilarating. The private jet to Las Vegas provided an unexpected intimacy that no amount of boardroom negotiations could have created. 35,000 feet above the desert, with Emma curled up in a leather seat reading robotics journals and Alex reviewing Pinnacle's operational reports, Veronica found herself studying the two people who were about to become her family. The cabin was configured for business meetings, but felt more like a living room with Emma's various electronic devices spread across a table, her animated explanations of emerging assistive technologies filling the space with enthusiasm that was infectious. Alex listened to his daughter with the complete attention that had first caught Veronica's notice, asking questions that demonstrated both genuine interest and sophisticated understanding. The problem with current wheelchair interface technology, Emma was explaining, gesturing with the passion of someone who'd clearly inherited her father's teaching abilities, is that it assumes all mobility limitations are identical, but brain injury affects motor control differently than spinal cord injury, which is different from muscular dystrophy. Veronica found herself drawn into the conversation, despite having no background in biomedical engineering. So you're saying the technology needs to be more personalized? Exactly. Emma's eyes lit up with the joy of being understood. Dad taught me that good engineering starts with understanding the specific problem you're trying to solve. You can't design effective solutions for generic disability. You have to design for individual needs. Alex smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm. Emma's been working on adaptive interface concepts since she was 9. Her personal experience gives her insights that most researchers never consider. Because most researchers haven't had to relearn how to control their own bodies, Emma added matter-of-factly. I remember what it felt like when my brain couldn't talk to my hands properly. That's not theoretical knowledge, it's lived experience. The casual reference to her traumatic recovery revealed depths of resilience that made Veronica's corporate challenges seem almost trivial by comparison. This 11-year-old had faced genuine life-or-death struggles and emerged not just intact, but determined to use her experience to help others. Emma, Veronica said carefully, would you be interested in working with Pinnacle's technology team? Not just on accessibility improvements, but as a genuine consultant? We could create a formal advisory position. Emma's eyes widened with excitement, but she looked to her father for guidance. Alex nodded encouragingly. If you're serious about that offer, Veronica, Emma would be thrilled. She's been looking for ways to apply her ideas in real-world settings. I'm completely serious. Emma's insights could revolutionize how we think about inclusive design. Veronica was already envisioning the possibilities. We could pilot new accessibility technologies across our properties, potentially setting industry standards. The conversation continued for the next hour, with Emma outlining specific improvements that could be implemented immediately and others that would require longer-term development. Her ideas were practical, innovative, and demonstrated an understanding of both technical requirements and human needs that impressed Veronica more with each suggestion. As Emma eventually dozed off, still clutching her tablet, Alex moved to sit across from Veronica in the cabin's conversation area. The change in seating created a more intimate setting that felt appropriate for the serious conversation they needed to have. She's extraordinary, Veronica said quietly, not wanting to wake Emma, but unable to contain her admiration. I've worked with Fortune 500 executives who don't have her combination of vision and practical thinking. Alex's expression softened as he looked at his sleeping daughter. She's had to be extraordinary. The brain injury forced her to approach everything differently. She couldn't rely on automatic responses or conventional thinking. Every skill she developed required conscious effort and creative problem-solving. Is that why you left the military? The level of attention she needed? Partially. But also because I realized that raising Emma was the most important engineering project I'd ever take on. Everything I knew about systems design, troubleshooting, optimization, it all applied to helping her rebuild her capabilities. Veronica studied his profile as he watched Emma sleep, seeing something she'd never encountered in her corporate world: pure, uncomplicated devotion to someone else's well-being. You gave up a career you loved. I traded one career I loved for another I loved more, Alex corrected gently. Being Emma's father has been more challenging and more rewarding than any military assignment. She's taught me things about resilience, creativity, and determination that no engineering school could have provided. The plane's engines provided a steady background, as they flew through the night toward Las Vegas and whatever their marriage would become. Veronica found herself relaxing in a way she rarely experienced. No board meetings to prepare for, no competitors to outmaneuver, no family expectations to fulfill. Just conversation with someone who saw her clearly and seemed to like what he saw. Can I ask you something personal? Alex said, his voice carrying the careful tone of someone approaching sensitive territory. After the day we've had, I think we've moved beyond formal boundaries. Why haven't you married before? I know about Harrison being strategic rather than romantic, but before him, was there ever anyone you loved? The question touched on territory Veronica rarely examined, even privately. I convinced myself I was too busy building the company to prioritize relationships, but that was self-protective fiction. The truth is, I was terrified of being vulnerable enough to love someone completely. She looked out the plane window at stars scattered across the desert sky. My parents' marriage taught me that love could be weaponized, that emotional openness created opportunities for betrayal. I decided early that professional success was safer than personal intimacy. And now? Now I'm marrying someone I met 12 hours ago, which suggests my careful emotional strategies haven't been as effective as I thought. Her laugh held more self-awareness than bitterness. But sitting here with you and Emma, I'm starting to understand the difference between strategic relationships and authentic connection. Alex leaned forward slightly, his expression serious but warm. Veronica, I want you to know, whatever happens tomorrow, whatever this marriage becomes, I'm grateful for today. You've given Emma opportunities I never could have provided alone. More than that, you've treated her as an intellectual equal, valued her ideas, seen her potential. She makes it easy. Emma's remarkable, but then, she learned from a remarkable father. The compliment was simple, but seemed to affect Alex deeply. I've spent 6 years wondering if I was doing enough for her, if my choices were limiting her future. Seeing her with you today, watching her excitement about contributing to something meaningful, I feel like maybe I got some things right. Veronica felt an unexpected wave of tenderness for this man who'd sacrificed everything for his daughter's well-being and still worried it wasn't enough. Alex, you've raised an extraordinary young woman who combines brilliant technical thinking with genuine compassion. Whatever else happens, that's an achievement worth celebrating. They talked until Emma woke as the plane began its descent into Las Vegas. The conversation ranged from practical wedding logistics to deeper questions about how to merge their very different worlds. By the time they landed, Veronica realized that her desperate business arrangement had evolved into something much more significant, the foundation of a partnership that might actually work. The wedding suite at the Bellagio was elegant without being ostentatious, chosen more for privacy than grandeur. Emma immediately claimed the couch, spreading out her devices and announcing her intention to design wedding apps while the adults handled boring legal stuff. Tomorrow morning, Alex said as they reviewed the ceremony schedule, we're going to wake up married. Are you ready for that? Veronica considered the question seriously. 24 hours earlier, she'd been engaged to Harrison Blackwood, in an arrangement that made perfect strategic sense and left her feeling empty. Now she was about to marry a man she was still getting to know, and for the first time in years, she felt hopeful about the future. I'm ready to try, she said honestly. I'm ready to see what we can build together. As they said goodnight, Emma looked up from her tablet with the satisfied expression of someone who'd solved a complex problem. You know what I figured out today? What's that? Alex asked, settling into the chair beside her. You two are compatible because you're both fixers. Dad fixes broken systems. Veronica fixes broken companies. I think you're going to be really good at fixing things together. The observation was delivered with 11-year-old confidence, but it contained a wisdom that made both adults pause. Perhaps Emma had identified something they were still learning to see themselves, that their greatest strength might not be what they could achieve individually, but what they could accomplish as a team. The wedding ceremony was scheduled for 10 a.m. at a private chapel in the Bellagio, but at 6:30 a.m., Veronica's phone began buzzing with urgent calls that threatened to destroy everything they'd planned. The first call was from Harold Brennan, his voice tense with barely controlled panic. Veronica, we have a problem. The story leaked. Every major business publication is running headlines about your emergency marriage to a janitor. The stock is already down 8% in pre-market trading. She stepped onto the suite's balcony, not wanting to wake Alex and Emma, but her racing heart made quiet conversation difficult. How did they find out? We were completely discreet. Someone from the board or legal team must have talked. The details are too accurate to be speculation. They know about the trust requirements, the deadline, everything. Harold's voice carried the exhaustion of someone who'd been managing crisis communication since dawn. The second call came from her adoptive father's estate attorney, someone she hadn't spoken to in 3 years, but who still wielded considerable influence over family matters. Jonathan Mills had the smooth, dangerous voice of a man accustomed to destroying reputations efficiently. Veronica, I represent certain family interests that are deeply concerned about your impulsive decision-making. There are parties prepared to challenge this marriage as fraudulent, designed solely to circumvent the trust requirements rather than reflect genuine matrimonial intent. The legal threat was both vague and terrifying. If anyone could prove the marriage was purely strategic, it might not satisfy the trust conditions, leaving Pinnacle vulnerable to takeover regardless of the ceremony. Furthermore, Mills continued, there are questions about Mr. Thornwell's background that might interest the media. His military discharge wasn't entirely voluntary. There were concerns about his psychological fitness following his wife's death and his daughter's injury. Veronica felt ice form in her stomach. What are you implying? I'm implying that a man who left a promising military career due to mental health concerns might not be the stable partner your shareholders expect. The narrative writes itself. Desperate CEO marries unstable janitor to preserve family fortune. The attack was brilliant in its cruelty, taking Alex's greatest strength, his devotion to Emma, and reframing it as psychological weakness. Worse, it threatened to subject Emma to public scrutiny about her father's mental state during her recovery. When she returned to the suite, Alex was awake, reading the morning's headlines on his phone. His expression was grim but unsurprised, as if he'd been expecting this kind of attack. How bad is it? Veronica asked, though she already knew from his posture. Bad enough. They're portraying you as either desperate or delusional. Me as an opportunist taking advantage of your crisis. He set down the phone carefully. But the worst part is what this means for Emma. They're going to dig into her medical history. Our family circumstances, everything private we've tried to protect. Emma appeared in the doorway, already dressed and ready for the wedding, but her expression showed she'd overheard enough to understand the situation. Are you calling it off? She asked directly. The question hung in the air between them. Veronica realized this was the moment of choice, safety versus authenticity, protecting reputation versus protecting the relationship they'd begun. Building. Alex stood and moved to his daughter, kneeling to her eye level. Emma, this might get very difficult. Media attention. People saying things about our family that aren't true or aren't fair. Are you strong enough to handle that? Emma's smile was fierce. Dad, I've handled brain surgery, learning to walk again, and kids at school who thought I was stupid because I talked funny. I think I can handle some journalists. She looked at Veronica with the same direct gaze that had evaluated her the night before. The question isn't whether I'm strong enough. The question is whether you're brave enough to choose us over what other people think. The challenge was clear, delivered with 11-year-old honesty that cut through every adult complication. Veronica looked at Alex, seeing in his eyes the same question Emma had asked. Was she willing to fight for something real, or would she retreat to the safety of conventional expectations? We're getting married, Veronica said firmly, her voice carrying the authority that had built a business empire. And then we're going home to show everyone exactly what they underestimated. 6 months later, Veronica Carter Fenrose stood in the renovated boardroom of Pinnacle Luxury Resorts. Watching her husband present the quarterly efficiency report to a group of executives who no longer questioned his expertise. The transformation had been remarkable, not just in the company's performance, but in the three people who'd gambled everything on an impossible marriage. Alex had been right about the $12 million in annual savings. His recommendations had actually exceeded projections, generating nearly $15 million in cost reductions, while improving guest satisfaction scores across all properties. More importantly, his integration into the executive team had brought a collaborative leadership style that contrasted sharply with the competitive dynamics that had previously dominated corporate culture. The accessibility upgrades Emma designed have been implemented across 8 properties. Alex was explaining, his presentation revealing the confidence of someone who'd found his professional home. Guest feedback has been overwhelmingly positive, and we're seeing increased bookings from travelers with disabilities and their families. Emma, now 12 and serving as Pinnacle's youngest official consultant, had revolutionized their approach to inclusive hospitality. Her adaptive technology concepts were being licensed by other hotel chains, generating revenue streams nobody had anticipated. More remarkably, she'd become something of a celebrity in engineering circles, invited to speak at conferences about the intersection of personal experience and innovative design, the media attention that had seemed so threatening during their wedding week had ultimately worked in their favor. The story of the CEO who married her janitor and discovered he was a brilliant engineer captured public imagination in ways that traditional corporate narratives never could. Pinnacle's stock price had recovered and exceeded previous highs, driven partly by financial performance, but largely by a brand narrative about recognizing hidden potential and valuing authentic partnerships. The Phoenix expansion project is ahead of schedule and under budget, Alex continued, clicking to architectural renderings that showed Emma's accessibility innovations integrated seamlessly into luxury design. We're expecting to set new industry standards for inclusive luxury hospitality. Veronica watched her husband command the room with quiet authority, remembering the man who'd emptied trash cans while brilliant solutions went unrecognized. The wedding had been the beginning, but the real transformation had occurred in the months that followed as they learned to navigate marriage, parenthood, and business partnerships simultaneously. The challenges had been significant. Learning to balance Emma's needs with corporate demands, managing media scrutiny that sometimes felt invasive, and figuring out how to be married to someone she was still getting to know. But Emma had been right about their compatibility. They were both fixers, and they'd approach their relationship like any complex system that needed thoughtful engineering. After the meeting ended, the three of them walked together toward the executive parking garage where Alex's sensible sedan sat next to Veronica's Tesla. Emma, laden with robotics equipment for her afternoon engineering club, chattered excitedly about her latest project. The artificial limb interface I'm designing could revolutionize prosthetics, she explained with the enthusiasm that had become her trademark. Instead of just responding to muscle tension, it would actually learn the user's movement patterns and anticipate needs. That sounds incredible, Veronica replied, meaning it completely. Have you thought about patent applications? Dad's helping me with the legal research. We think it could be commercially viable within 5 years maybe. Sooner with the right development funding. Alex smiled at his daughter's ambitions, then turned to Veronica. Speaking of development funding, the board approved the Emma Thornwell Innovation Grant Program. Starting next year, we'll provide scholarships and research funding for students working on disability-related technology. The program had been Veronica's idea, a way to formalize Emma's consulting role while creating opportunities for other young innovators. It represented the kind of long-term thinking that had become possible once Pinnacle was secure from takeover threats. As they reached their cars, Emma hugged them both with the casual affection of a daughter who'd never doubted she was loved and supported. I'm proud of you too, she said with 12-year-old seriousness. You figured out how to be married partners and business partners without messing up either one. After Emma left for her engineering club, Alex and Veronica found themselves alone in the parking garage where, 6 months earlier, she'd offered marriage to a stranger. The setting felt symbolic, the same place, but everything transformed. "Do you ever regret it?" Alex asked, the question that had become ritual between them. Asked without anxiety, but with genuine curiosity about their impossible success. Veronica looked at him, seeing not the desperate solution to a crisis, but the partner who'd helped her build something better than she'd ever imagined possible. "I regret that it took a crisis to bring us together. I regret that I spent 34 years thinking strategic relationships were safer than authentic ones, but regret marrying you? Never." She leaned against her car, studying the man who'd become her husband, business partner, and closest friend. "We saved the company, Alex, but more than that, we saved each other from lives that looked successful but felt empty." Alex moved closer, close enough to take her hand in his engineer's fingers that were now manicured for board meetings but still carried the confidence of someone who could fix anything broken. "Emma was right about us being fixers," he said softly. "But she didn't mention the most important thing we fixed, which was the idea that love and business success are mutually exclusive, that you have to choose between professional achievement and personal happiness." His smile carried all the warmth that had first caught her attention. "Turns out you can have both, if you're willing to marry the right janitor." Veronica laughed, pulling him closer for a kiss that tasted like possibility and promise. In the distance, she could see the Pinnacle logo on the Thornfield Tower, symbol of everything her family had built and everything she and Alex were building together. "Best business decision I ever made," she murmured against his lips, meaning every word. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.